We're going to get started with securing iOS with Jamf Now. My name is Danielle Dries. I'm an Apple evangelist here at Jamf, and I'm very excited to take you on this tour today of securing your iOS devices with Jamf Now. Our agenda is going to be a bit of a Jamf overview, security concerns. We're going to go through a demo of Jamf Now. We're going to talk about some best practices, and we'll leave you with some resources to end. So thank you again very much for joining us today. A little bit of background with Jamf. We're actually celebrating our 17th birthday this week. We were founded in 2002 at the University of Wisconsin at Eau Claire when our founder decided that as an admin, he didn't want to have to touch every machine in a computer lab going around and entering in passwords and Wi-Fi networks and everything. So he started coding and scripting, and thus Jamf Pro was born, which was formerly known as the Casper Suite. Today, we are going to be focusing on another one of our products, and we'll be going over that in a bit. But as a company, we do support macOS, iOS, tvOS through our Jamf Pro product. Jamf Now covers macOS, but specifically we'll be talking about iOS today. More than 30,000 organizations are currently relying on Jamf to manage over 14 million Apple devices. We manage 100% Apple. We don't dabble in other platforms that exist in the world, which allows us to have a laser focus into the products that we serve and the operating systems that we work with. I think these numbers show a ton of information for us about, 20 of the top 25 Fortune 500 companies are working with us. But the number that I am most proud of as a Jamf is the 96% retention rate for customers. I think that it's incredible that after 17 years, our customers are happy to be with Jamf and tend to choose to stay with Jamf for the long haul. We have an amazing support team that's based mainly in Minneapolis at our headquarters in Eau Claire, but we do have support across the world to make sure that we're helping other geos and different time zones. But 96% retention rate is something that we as a company feel extremely strong about and very, very proud of. I think one of the other things that helps our customer retention rate is the fact that we have a history of day zero support. As most of you know, Apple releases operating system big upgrades, typically in the fall, though they've changed when that is over the years. But they also have small releases throughout the year, right? We are expecting iOS 13 to drop some point this fall of 2019, but in between now and then, there could be an iOS 12.4.1, 12.4.2 that come out, and we are here to support you through all of that. Now, a lot of mobile device management companies talk about having, zero-day compatibility to make sure that if somebody were to upgrade to iOS 13, they won't break mobile device management, but we really take that to heart and try and have as many features as we can in our products that Apple has released from an MDM perspective. And we're going to talk about a little bit more about MDM in just a moment here. But you can see we've had day zero support since 2010, which I think is a pretty remarkable experience for our teams as well. As I mentioned, we have a couple of different products. Jamf Now we're going to focus on today. We have Jamf Pro. We have Jamf School, which is mainly for education institutions. Jamf Pro, of course, is for our very large organizations and IT-focused people within those organizations. We have Jamf Nation user community, which is the largest group of Mac admins across the world that come together on our site and talk about problems they're experiencing and ways to fix them and questions that they have, and we're looking for best practices. And you can hear it straight from other customers' mouths rather than from Jamf's on what we believe is the best. The other great product we announced last year was Jamf Connect. It's a way to sync passwords. This is something that typically is in conjunction with Jamf Pro, but there is some room for Jamf Now, but it doesn't work quite as seamlessly yet because we've been focusing a little bit more on the Jamf Pro for single sign-on organizations. As I mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on Jamf Now, which is our on-demand Apple management for small to medium business solutions, no IT required, which is incredible. 4 years ago, when we were still using just the Casper Suite, which has now transitioned into being called Jamf Pro, we recognized that we were really missing a key group of organizations who didn't need the complexity of Jamf Pro. It's an incredible powerhouse product, but if you don't have a need for it, then it's too much and it's confusing. And if I'm a small, medium business owner or a manager of a department, I don't need something complex. I need something simple and easy to jump into. Most of the time with Jamf Now, you can set it up in about 15 minutes, which is pretty amazing to support our small to medium business customers that are out there. I think another amazing feature of Jamf Now is that your first 3 devices are free. So you can test it out, see if it works, does it fit the needs that you have. And I think that most of the time, if you test out those 3 devices and you find that you need a more powerful product, you identify that fairly quickly and we can have a conversation about Jamf Pro. Jamf Now really meant for those small and medium businesses. If you have 1 device, you are never going to pay for Jamf Now. But as soon as you hit your 4th device, it's really easy to continue on with your management capabilities. Now, I've said MDM and mobile device management a lot already in this webinar, and some of you may be thinking, I have no idea what that is. So at its core, mobile device management is exactly what it says it is. It's a way to manage your mobile devices. Now, for a long time, we thought of mobile devices as iOS and iPads, right? They were our mobile operating systems. We took them everywhere we went. But I can tell you that I have a MacBook Pro sitting in front of me right now, and this thing is very light, and it goes with me just about everywhere I need it to. It goes almost everywhere my phone goes, and it could go everywhere. And that same operating system is on all of the Macs that exist for Apple. So in managing anything that's mobile, we manage the whole fleet of Apple devices. MDM is built into the framework of all of the Apple operating systems. Apple designs its software to look for a mobile device management system like Jamf for commands as soon as it goes through the setup process. If the device has not yet been assigned to an MDM, it would continue to function as a consumer device, which we all know and love. If the device has been assigned to a mobile device management tool, it will function as a business device and follow the steps outlined by your MDM tool. This allows you to send remote commands to configure your devices, as well as keeping them secure as new protocols are launched. Apple decides which MDM commands companies have access to. So you can't do everything on an iOS device because Apple doesn't allow you to control everything, but it does give a broad range of MDM commands that people have access to. Each year, of course, they release those new operating systems and oftentimes will release more MDM features for companies like Jamf to take full advantage of. And just last week, Apple hosted its Worldwide Developers Conference. This is where the industry learns of new operating systems like macOS Catalina and iOS 13 that are dropping this fall. And we also learn about new MDM protocols released by Apple. Now, the session on that was on Friday. It was the last day of the conference, so our team hasn't had a full chance to gather all of the information that was released and talked about what our next steps are, but be sure to tune in to jamf.com over the summer and watch out for press releases as we announce the features that we're going to be able to help. Now, our balance with Jamf Now, whenever we're putting in new features, is can we make that protocol simple? Because like I said, there's a vast array of MDM commands that are available from Apple, and Jamf Pro takes advantage of all of those. Jamf Now, we try and balance between being easy to use, but still extremely powerful. So you should be seeing some updates with Jamf Now throughout the summer. We oftentimes send out an email release. If you'd like to sign up for those, you can go to support.jamfnow.com. That way you're updated on whatever we launch at any point over the summer or this fall. And we really try and keep the product up to date, managing as much as we can. But if it makes it too complex, we want to keep it very simple. As an overview, here are a couple of the key topics that mobile device management can handle. So it allows you to deploy your devices. It allows you to get inventory, which is huge for security and for businesses. We in Jamf Now use blueprints to push out to people. We can push out remote commands like lost mode and password locks. We can do app distribution using a couple of different tools from Apple. And we have some amazing security features that are built in, like requiring a passcode, which we'll go over some of those in more detail. As a side note, as we go through this, if you have questions along the way, please use chat or the questions area to put them in. I may not answer them in the moment, but I will definitely be checking those throughout the presentation. So if you have questions along the way, please let me know. If I hold off on them and I happen to miss it at the end, just throw the question in there again. Thank you. Now, how mobile device management works, I think, is huge to understand at kind of a high level, right? I'm not a developer and I'm not an engineer, so going into the details of the proxies and the things that people are using to do it is not my forte. However, I am great at explaining things to the general user as I would be if I had a business and was running Jamf Now. We start by, within Jamf Now, connecting to Apple's push notification service. That's what APNS stands for. And it's in the cloud that Apple has created for all of their devices to call into repeatedly throughout the day to see if there are any new commands. This is how we get things like ESPN updates or Twitter announcements or new mail. Our device is trained to call home to Apple's server often and make any changes. Now, with Jamf Now, we can send a command using the Apple push notification server, and it pushes out to a device like an iPad or an iPhone or a Mac. And then that device will also return inventory back to Jamf Now, like serial number, or this app did not deploy, or we lost Wi-Fi connection. So it will communicate back to Jamf Now. And then Jamf Now can then push out new commands based on what that is. So I think that circle is really important to understand, that we start with Jamf Now, we connect to the Apple push notification server, and that creates a handshake between our device and Jamf Now as a whole. And that's one of the first setup processes when going through Jamf Now. So as you can see on the little iMac that's on the screen here, there's a spot that says APNS with a green check mark next to it. If your devices are having trouble checking in at any point in time, see that that green check mark is still there. It is a certificate that expires after a year. So if it expires, you have to renew it. There's no cost associated with APNS, Apple Push Notification Server. So definitely worth it to sign up so that you can, in fact, have Jamf Now work for you. This is what MDM is. The next piece is the idea of deployment. Now, with iOS devices, we have a couple of different ways to get our devices into Jamf Now, because once we set up our Apple push notification server, we don't have any devices there yet. There's a couple of extra steps we need to do. Now, the first one can be a user initiated via URL, which means I, as an end user, would go to my device and I would type into Safari or whatever internet browser I'm using a specific URL that you create while you're setting up your Jamf Now account. Once I go to there, I choose that I want to enroll that device, and now it will show inventory in Jamf Now, and I can push some blueprints out to that device and some settings and some apps out to it. This one is great if you have devices that are out in the field that you don't want to bring back in and you need light management. Or if you have people who are using their own personal devices, but you want to give them access to their company email and some of the apps that you use, this is great for that. There are some drawbacks, which we are going to talk about in just a moment here. The next way to get devices enrolled, if you have them already out in the field, is using Apple Configurator, which is a macOS app that's free from Apple. You just find it in the App Store. You do have to plug in the device physically to a Mac, so you use a Lightning to USB or Lightning to USB cable to plug that in, and you run through Configurator with it. That device then becomes supervised, which is a greater form of management, and it is ready to be enrolled into Jamf Now with full capabilities. A couple of drawbacks with Configurator is that you do have to wipe the device back to factory settings, and you cannot restore from a backup because that backup was not managed. Therefore, you wouldn't be able to restore from that backup and keep management on the device. And the device is available for removal from MDM for 30 days. After 30 days, you cannot remove mobile device management from that device any longer. Versus with the user-initiated URL, they can always remove it from the device. The way that you prevent that from happening is using what we recommend as the best tool for the job, auto-enrollment from Apple. You do this by enrolling in Apple Business Manager program, which is another free deployment program from Apple. And I'm going to jump to another slide and kind of talk about a little bit of a background, because Apple Business Manager was created last year at WWDC from Apple in June, but it took some programs that existed and kind of changed them. So we used to have the device enrollment program and the volume purchasing program. These two programs from Apple got merged into one and became Apple Business Manager. Now, if you're buying from Apple Direct, or if you're buying from one of the carriers like a T-Mobile or a Sprint or a Verizon, you can register yourself for Apple Business Manager. The beauty of that is that when you buy devices through this authorized process, they will automatically show up into Apple Business Manager, which gives you a greater form of management called Supervision, and puts them automatically into Jamf Now. So as soon as that device calls home to Apple during the setup process, it will show up in your Apple Business Manager account, which will tell it to link to Jamf Now. So you never have to touch the device. You can allow your end users to take a shrink-wrapped iPad out of the box themselves, go through the setup process, and be able to carry on with their device. You, as an admin or an owner of a company, don't have to set up every single device by yourself. You can allow those end users the opportunity to do it when using Apple Business Manager. And this is the most recommended way through Jamf to get all of your devices into mobile device management. Some key pieces about Apple Business Manager that are included are, of course, deploying and provisioning devices. As I mentioned, you can have them auto-load, so it's zero-touch deployment out to the devices. The other wonderful thing that you can do is push out content. So apps, in this instance, you could push out to devices. If you have an Apple Business Manager account, you don't need an Apple ID on the device, which is amazingly powerful for our end users to not need to sign in with an Apple ID. It's also huge when we think of a security standpoint for our devices, right? That if we don't allow end users to put their personal Apple ID on a device, we know that that device is strictly for business use, and there isn't anything personal that could interrupt or infiltrate or do anything to our devices. So with Apple Business Manager in place, connected to Jamf Now, we can push out apps without needing an Apple ID on a device. I do see a couple of questions popping in, so I'm going to take a quick pause here and go through those. Is the user-initiated URL deployment, does that enroll a device? And yes, with user-initiated deployment, it does enroll a device into management. And another question here. It looks like, is it possible to sell a volume purchase license for private persons? By Apple directly is not possible to register as a private person at the Apple Business Manager. And that's an excellent question. Apple Business Manager is for registered businesses. So as a private citizen who doesn't own a business or have access to a business, it's not a tool that Apple will allow you to have access to because it's meant to be for business use. There are tons of consumer tools that Apple has out there, including family sharing and some other things along that lines that you could walk through. So if you're looking to manage personal devices, connect with your local Apple store or an online Apple team to walk through what that might look like. But Apple Business Manager is specifically for businesses. Now, if you are a school and you've joined our webinar, welcome. Apple has another program called Apple School Manager that is used to manage devices that are in an education setting. So if you are a school, shoot me a chat and I'll be sure to have our education team follow up with you because we are focusing primarily on commercial today. So we've got a couple of these that have come through. Give me one moment. Wonderful. So we're going to continue on with our webinar today. Keep those questions coming, though. I've mentioned a few times that there's management and supervision, and we haven't gone over what that means. So I want to make sure that we cover this. And this is a huge piece with how we deploy devices, that we have management and then we have supervision, which is a greater form of management for devices. If I do the user-initiated URL initiation, it gives me management over a device. So that means I can push out things to the device, but I can't take very many things away from them because we haven't proven within Apple's system that it's a business-owned device. The way that we treat a device as a business-owned device is through Apple Business Manager. With management, we have light capabilities that we can do within Jamf Now, like pushing out a Wi-Fi. We can require a passcode. We can push out a web clip. We can push out email settings. But sometimes people don't want like the App Store to show up on a device. You can't do that unless you have supervision. And this is in a way through Apple Business Manager to prove to Apple that that device is not consumer owned. It's a business owned device, which is why we recommend it as the best practice for enrolling devices, because it will give you the greatest control over devices. You can do things like put phones in lost mode, which is a huge security concern. You can remove activation lock from devices. You can do a ton of other things that we'll talk about a little bit more in our demo. So knowing the difference, management is a lesser form of management for supervision. I know it's a little confusing because it's called management both ways, but management is kind of the lowest common denominator. Supervision brings us to another level. Now, if you recall, there were 3 ways to deploy devices with initiation. We had the user-based, and we had Apple Business Manager, and then in the middle, we had Configurator. Configurator allows you to enroll an iOS device into Apple Business Manager. So if you have devices that weren't purchased through an authorized channel, like maybe you bought them directly from the Apple Store without going through their business team, or you bought from a Target or a Best Buy, or maybe even you had them donated because you're a nonprofit organization and they weren't purchased in this process. With iOS devices specifically, you can plug them into Configurator on a Mac, which again is an app available in the App Store, and you can enroll those into Apple Business Manager, thus making them a supervised device. We've got a few more questions that have come in, so I'm going to take a quick pause here and see what we can find. I got a question about what are some of the main differences between Jamf Now and Jamf Pro. And we come at it from a way of IT versus non-IT. If you are an IT professional, you've got greater granularity into what you can do with Jamf Pro. I don't want to go totally into the deep with that, but if you go to our Jamf website, there's a comparison and you can see some of the key things. A couple of the first ones are going to be if you need to do scripting on a Mac, that's going to be something that can only be done through Jamf Pro. If you want to do activation lock without having to touch the device, that's only through Jamf Pro. So a couple of more granular type items that you can do using Jamf Pro that Jamf Now wouldn't have access to. Another question, I apologize, this was a follow-up from here. Oh, with user-initiated URL, it will not enroll it into Apple Business Manager. That is correct. So if you use user-initiated URL to enroll your devices, it won't put them in supervision and it won't put them into Apple Business Manager. There are only 2 ways to enroll into Apple Business Manager. 1 is to buy them through a specific channel, or 2 is using Configurator to enroll them into that. Does the Apple Configurator app need to be on both the Manage and Managing device? And the answer is no. It just has to be on a Mac, and you plug that device in. Apple Configurator is actually not available on an iOS device. It's only available in the Mac App Store. So you would just need it for that initial setup process, and once it was set up, you would unplug it, and that device would be in supervision. So you only need to have it on a Mac. So I got a question about providing the URL for the user-initiated enrollment, and that is actually something that's specific to your Jamf Now instance. So there isn't a general one that everyone uses. If you already have a Jamf Now account, there's an open enrollment tab that you have. During the demo, I'll be sure to show that off, where that is so you can find it. But there isn't a generic enroll into Jamf because otherwise it would go into everybody's Jamf's world. We want to make sure it goes into your specific Jamf Now account. A question around Apple TV. So at this time, Jamf Now doesn't have any management capabilities for Apple TV. That is something that is only available in Jamf Pro. So as a question of what are some of the differences, that would be another one. Apple TV is only available manageable in Jamf Pro. Wonderful. All right, looks like I've made it through the next chunk of questions, so that is great news. We're going to continue to move on here. And excellent. Give me 1 second. There we go. So we are talking about securing iOS in this webinar. So I wanted to make sure that we talk about some of the key security features that we can offer through Jamf Now, which is a great reason to have management on your devices. 1, I can require a passcode on all of my devices. And the great thing is if you're going to have your end users having devices, they can choose their own passcode because I can wipe the passcode at any time as the admin of Jamf Now. Whether it is a managed or supervised device, passcode requirement can be accomplished on both devices. So if I have company information that ends up on a device, I want to make sure that there's a passcode because if I am a bakery owner and I want to protect my recipes, but I push them via email to my end users so they know how to bake the best cupcakes in the world in the morning, I want to make sure if they accidentally leave their phone on a park bench, one of my competitors can't just open it and know the recipe to my best cupcakes in the world. So we require a passcode. With a passcode requirement on iOS, it will automatically encrypt that device. Now, encryption is kind of a crazy idea, and if you're not super techie, you probably don't know about it and maybe don't even care about it. But it's an amazing feature that's just built into iOS. When you require a passcode, your iOS device is encrypted. And what that protection gives you is that if I'm a thief and I steal an iOS device from your business and I take out the memory chip, within that I dismantle the iOS device and I take out the memory chip and I put it into a different iOS device, without the passcode, that is a bunch of jumbled letters and symbols and numbers. It doesn't make any sense and it's impossible to decipher it. So having your device have a passcode on it forces it to also have encryption. So you've got an extra level of security built in by just having a 4-digit passcode or a 6-digit passcode onto your device. And you can choose how long you want it to be. As I mentioned, you can lock and clear passcode. Locking it means that if I come to you as the admin of our Jamf Now account and I say, I lost my iPad in the airplane, you can hit lock and make sure that it's locked down, it's password protected. And if I come to you and say, I forgot my passcode, I don't know what it is, you can hit an unlock command, which clears the passcode for me. I can re-enter a new one, thus securing encryption on my device. There are some amazing restrictions that you can do if you want to prevent your end users from erasing the device and putting it back to factory settings, or if you want to prevent them from using an Apple Watch to unlock a device, all kinds of great stuff within restrictions that we'll see a little bit more in our demo. You can wipe a device. So if you have company information on that device, you can completely wipe it back to factory settings and allow it to be re-enrolled. And you can unenroll a device. If you know that a device has gone and it's gone and lost forever, you can unenroll it so it removes everything that you've pushed out to it with Jamf. So all of your bakery recipes or your construction plans, whatever industry you're in, you remove everything from management, thus making it pretty useless to anybody. And then finally, lost mode. If you have used iOS devices, you might be familiar with Find My iPhone or Find My iPad. This is a consumer feature offered from Apple that if you have an Apple ID on a device, and it goes missing, I can log into any computer anywhere that has internet access, go to iCloud.com and locate where my device is. If I know that that device is lost, I can put it in a lost mode, which means that it cannot be unlocked without me from the center console of my iCloud account unlocking it. And it was phenomenal for consumers. We didn't have a great solution for businesses until about 3.5 years ago, which we incorporated right into Jamf Now, is lost mode for business. So if I have removed the ability to put an Apple ID on a device because it's a supervised device, I have the ability to do that. I also get access to lost mode, which means that I, from my Jamf Now console, can put a device in lost mode. I get the last known coordinates of where it is, and I lock it down. If that device, while in lost mode, was brought into a Genius bar at an Apple store to be removed from lost mode, they don't have a way to unlock it. In fact, they would have some questions probably for you why you have a lost mode iPad that you don't know how to unlock, because you should be able to do that. So it gives you an extra level of protection to make sure that that device is unusable by anybody. So if you have an employee who's acting nefariously, or if a device goes missing, you can lock it down, removing access to everything from them. The only way to unlock it is through the Jamf Now portal and being able to unlock it, and then people would have information. I think there's a really valid point here of protecting our end users as well, because if I am given a device from my company, which Jamf has given me an iPhone to use for business, I think that I, as the end user, should know what kind of management they have over my device and what kind of view they have into what I'm doing. And with MDM, we can't view your clicks and all of the things that you're doing. So I can't track your internet and all of that with MDM specifically. I can't track your Safari websites you're going to. And I can't track you as a human with your device everywhere you go. But I can put it in a lost mode, in which case my last known coordinates are, of course, sent to my Jamf Now admin. But I, as the end user, get a notification on my device as well that says, hey, your device was put into lost mode at 3 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday. So I know that as an end user. Now, if I requested it to be in lost mode at 3 o'clock in the morning, then great. I knew that happened and I asked for it. If I didn't ask for that, I can go to my HR person and have some questions, right? So we want to make sure that we're protecting and securing everybody's information across the board and protecting our end users as well as our companies as we can. Now we're going to jump into our demo, because this, I think, is where it gets really fun to kind of see it in action. If you already have a Jamf Now account, this is great. This will be a good reminder for a lot of the things that you are working on. If you don't have a Jamf Now account, then this will be even better, because you're going to be able to see it for the first time. All right, we should be jumping. Perfect. So the first thing you see when you jump into Jamf Now is our dashboard. And we talked about having inventory as one of the things that Jamf Now can capture from your device. I think this is huge, because in securing your technology, you want to make sure you know how many you have, right? And a lot of our small and medium businesses, when I ask how many devices you have, they say, 10 to 15, I don't know, 10 to 20. And then maybe they're stunned when they actually have 50. Right? Because we haven't done a great job of tracking how many devices we have. So if your device is supervised or open enrolled using the user-initiated enrollment, they will show up here, information. The key is on the device panel itself, there is a purple binoculars that shows that that device is supervised. If it's not, it doesn't have that. It only has the green enrolled button. So that's a key differentiator. Is this device supervised, so I have the greatest control over it, or is the device enrolled, in which case I have limited controls? We know that right here. We also pull a ton of information. So the first couple of tiles here are all about Jamf Now and things they've pushed out to show that you actually do have your Wi-Fi pushed out. You do have password pushed out. If at any point in time one of those devices stops communicating to Wi-Fi, it's going to communicate back to Jamf Now to say, this device is no longer communicating. And instead of saying applied in green underneath Wi-Fi, it says red issue, and you can go and investigate, right? So we are big fans of visual cues as well as physical cues within imagery cues. So, of course, green means everything's great, kind of like a stoplight. Continue on through the green light, you're cruising, it's great. Once it turns red, we know that we need to do some investigating. And there is some yellow on certain areas that will alert you that you're getting close, right? We might need to do some information. But in clue of inventory, it's nice we pull the serial number right here. So we've got that fully accessed out to our to our admin to know what that serial number is, I can check my AppleCare warranty coverage on apple.com to see if it falls under AppleCare, which is another great tool to use. We can see if it was purchased on a specific date. So if you're using a lease or you want to refresh iPads every 2 years or your iPhones every year, you know when it was purchased and when it's time to upgrade, keeping you up to date on the most recent hardware. We also can pull operating system information. So if I know that this device is only on iOS 12, but there was a big security patch on 12.2, we maybe want to update that operating system to ensure that it has the natural native tools from Apple to be the most secure it can be. Now, as you can see on this tile, it does show that there is one update available for this iPad that I could push, and then I would update that operating system with the click of a button. This update is only a feature of supervised devices. So if you have devices that were done through the user-initiated URL, you won't be able to utilize the update here. You will, of course, be able to go to the device itself and update the operating system. But I like to make that clear differentiator there. Another amazing thing with security is knowing how much space we have left on a device. So on this next tab, we have capacity. You can see this happens to be a 16 gigabyte iPad, and it's using some of the gigabytes for the software. So technically you only had 11.38 on this particular iPad available to use at all, and free is 8.85 gigs. Now, if you're like me before I started working in the technology world, I had no idea how big a gigabyte was. Right? I didn't know what one song meant, one picture meant, one email, one Pages document. It doesn't mean anything to me to have numbers thrown at me. It might as well say a bajillion. This is where we have this wonderful status bar underneath that shows that, oh, I'm not even halfway and I'm green. Green means I'm good to go. Smooth sailing. Let's keep cruising. So I know that I'm sitting green. I'm doing well. This is where we might start seeing yellow if we get a little bit farther along, and then of course we would see red when we're getting close to maxing out. That way you know if you're pushing out documentation to your end users using Pages or email, whatever it may be, you might need to have them free up some information first so that you have room to push the new blueprint plan or the new app that you want them to have. Really important when you're thinking about security. Do I have enough room on the device to make it be secure as I want it to be? Maybe I need to buy a bigger sized device, or maybe I need to remove some information. Of course, our next tab on the bottom left is saying that our passcode is enabled. For security, that's huge. We want to know that there is a passcode on that device and that it's enforced at all times. Next over, we have a great tile here around activation lock. If you're not familiar with activation lock, it goes into effect when a user puts an Apple ID on a device. It locks that device to that Apple ID so that if it were stolen, I feel like I'm using that reference a lot, and I apologize. There are not that many terrible people in the world, but it is a real concern when we're talking about security of information. So with activation lock, if the device is stolen and they try to reset it to factory settings, they won't be able to gain access to the device without entering the password and the email of that Apple ID. That means it's an activation lock. If that is turned on and an employee leaves your company, you don't know their password, you don't know their Apple ID, so you can't unlock it. And maybe that person has moved, doesn't want to share it over the phone, and can't walk into your building and unlock their device. With Jamf Now, when a device is in supervised mode, you will have access to a bypass code which unlocks your device for you. It's amazing and a game changer. If you have an iPad that you've given to me and I decide to leave the company and I forget, even accidentally, because I'm quitting and I'm excited, I'm moving on to another role or another company, and I forget to use my Apple ID to sign out of the device, you are stuck with a very expensive paperweight. You need a proof of purchase at an Apple Store Genius Bar to be able to unlock it, which, let's be honest, most of us don't necessarily have at the ready a proof of purchase. With Jamf Now, if that device is supervised, I can pop into my dashboard, I jump into the device, I enter in this code into the password field, and it unlocks your device for you. I never have to go to the Genius Bar. I don't have to call anybody. I don't have to do anything. I unlock it right here. It's back to factory settings and ready to go for the next user. This was a game changer when we instituted that, so we were pretty stoked about it. Another note here is another spot just to see that we're in supervision. And then last checked in is huge. Now, this device last checked in June 11th, which is pretty recent, right? It was yesterday. Typically, a device is going to check in daily. So we are good to go on that one. But if I go back out to one of these devices, if I remember right, Rose's iPhone hasn't checked in some time. Yes. Last checked in date was April 9th, 63 days ago. That makes me have some questions, right, on the security of my device. Has the device not been used and it's sitting on Rose's desk for the last 63 days because she only uses her Mac and her iPhone? She doesn't use an iPad, or I guess this case is an iPhone, so maybe she has a different one that she's using. Did she lose the device, in which case we have a bigger problem because she didn't come and tell me about it? Or, maybe Rose is out on maternity leave, so she's gone for 2 months, and we're not worried then because we know that her device shouldn't have checked in for the last 2 months because it's been turned off because she's not working. It doesn't alert us to what the problem is, but it shows a symptom and allows us to go and investigate more as an admin and find out, why is my device having a problem? And the great thing with Jamf Now is we alert you with these little red dots to tell you there's a problem, right? So there's a tile here that has a red dot and the Wi-Fi is out of date. And maybe that's the problem. We need Wi-Fi to communicate or a cellular connection. And if she has forgotten the Wi-Fi password and she's not using her device, we can go and figure out what's going on there. So the red dot is huge within Jamf Now to look for that imagery and those colors of what security issues could we potentially have at any moment. Now, I do want to call out, since we're on this device, that it says that it's enrolled, which means it's not supervised. We don't have the little supervision. So we can't update the operating system here, which is great to know. We don't have that control. Supervision is huge to be able to do with that. Wonderful. Now, I talked a little bit about blueprints, and in Jamf Now, this is how we decide what settings and what features we want to push out to a device. So on the left tab, I'm going to blueprints, and you can see I've got a couple of different ones that are built in here to my demo. You can make as many blueprints as you want. So in this example, we have some devices that are specifically for patient check-in using a kiosk mode. We have some that are for management, right? Management might need different apps. You might allow them to have less security on their devices, like for your own, if you're an owner of a company, you don't necessarily need the greatest level as you would somebody else. Maybe you have an operations team that needs different apps and different settings, sales team, because they're out in the field. You want to encourage different behaviors and the superintendent. So you can have as many blueprints as you want to have. I'm just jumping into operations as one as an option. Now, I'd mentioned beforehand that Apple Business Manager allowed you to do 2 things. One is auto-enroll devices into an MDM like Jamf Now. The other piece was pushing out content. So Apple Business Manager has a portion where you can buy apps at a company level. So you have one corporate credit card assigned, or you can do purchase orders with Apple to get credits that you can use to buy apps like Lightroom or Final Cut or a million different apps that exist out in the world, right? You use that as a central spot to buy all of your apps. And then you use Jamf Now to push the apps out. Now, if you're super familiar with the 2 apps that are on the screen here, Box and Zero, you would quickly be thinking to yourself, but Danielle, those are free apps. I don't have to pay for those. Why am I using Jamf Now to push those out? There's a couple of reasons. One, if I don't allow my users to have an Apple ID on their device, there's no way for them to get apps on their device. Rendering lit, almost useless, right? I mean, the phone will still work, but without many other apps, you probably can't do very much business work on it. This is where I can push out apps to a device that does not need an Apple ID. The other amazing thing is when a device is considered managed, because you've pushed it out using a mobile device management tool, when it's managed, I can have some controls over the device, and we're going to talk about it when we get to restrictions. But know that even with free apps, we recommend using the free Apple Business Manager program content section and using Jamf Now to push those out to your devices because it allows people to keep things separated for personal use versus professional use. The next thing that you can push out to devices is web clips. Now, if you're not familiar with web clips, it looks like an app on the device, but it actually just quickly takes you to a Safari page. So it's very similar to a bookmark, except I don't have to hit Safari and then hit bookmarks, and then it loads that page. It's a one-click touch, and I can custom brand it, so you could put a picture, whatever you wanted on there. This demo doesn't have any on there, but I see it being really valuable if you have an online menu that you can put that specific site and be a one-touch, or if you have an online catalog, or maybe an HR policy page or an intranet, make it one click and then your end users can use it really quickly. Security, which of course, securing your iOS devices is a part that we really are interested in. We talked about how requiring a passcode is essential on a device, right? We want to make sure that we're protecting our end users. We want to make sure that we're protecting our recipes and our blueprints and our management, everything that we do. We also probably have employee information on devices. I know if you were to look through my phone, you could get the access to a ton of Jamfs that work here. Their phone numbers, potentially their addresses. Passcodes protect people from stealing that information every day. So requiring a passcode is huge. But as business, we can make it a little bit more intense of a password. So they can't use 1111 or 1234 as their passcode. We can make it complex so it can't be repeated numbers, etc. We can make them put in alpha and numeric numbers in there or characters in there. We can change the passcode length to be as many digits as we want to. If you make it 24, I mean, wow, I wouldn't want to work for your organization and have to put a 24-digit character in there. But if it's important for a specific iPad or a specific iOS device, have at it. We've got it there for you. Most of the time we see people going with 6, maybe 8, but definitely 4 is kind of that minimum to make sure that we've got that passcode length in there. You can require a certain number of symbols. You can make them change the passcode on the regular. So if you want every 3 months, they have to put a new passcode on the device. You can do that with MDM. You can also say they can't repeat it, but one time a year. So you don't just have somebody, you have to make a new password and you make the password the same as the other one. You can also encourage them to know the password and saying that maximum failed attempts before erasing. So you don't have somebody doing like a passcode generator to get into a device or they just kind of get lucky. You can say after 9 attempts, we're going to erase that device back to factory settings because that person probably doesn't work here that's trying to get into that. So those are key things. The last couple maximum period of time available for iOS to auto lock settings. So if you want it to go to sleep after a minute or after 5 minutes, in case somebody does leave it on a park bench, you can go ahead and do that. The last 2 are Macs, so we're not going to go into those since we are focusing on iOS, but there is a description there. So if you're interested in managing your Macs using Jamf Now, that is there as well. The next amazing piece is email. So this is great. If you use Exchange, this loads a lot of the information that you already need to get Exchange email onto devices. This works, and I should mention, apps, web clip security, email, and Wi-Fi all work with user-initiated enrollment or supervised enrollment through Apple Business Manager. All of these will push out regardless. So within email, you've got an Exchange account, you put in whatever your host name is for your email, and then everybody who has a device that's listed under operations will then just be asked for their email and password so that you know that they have email on their device and you've pushed it out. If at any point in time you have to change the name of the host, you can do it to the blueprint instead of asking the end user to do it. Next to me, important piece is Wi-Fi, and I love this feature. I can tell you that Jamf has a guest web Wi-Fi account that's available to anybody who walks into our building, and we also have a private one that you have to be a Jamf employee to get access to, right? I'm sure there's other levels that are in there that I don't have access to if you're IT or if you're on the engineering team, but for the most part, we have 2. If Jamf told me the password to our employee-only email or our employee-only Wi-Fi, 100% I would put it on all my personal devices. No questions asked. If they gave me that password, it would be on every device, and any of my friends that came in to visit me at work or have lunch with me, I would tell them the password as well. In order to prevent that, we don't tell people what the password is, but using user-initiated enrollment or Apple Business Manager supervised devices, I can push out the Wi-Fi password and the name of it using Jamf Now, and I never have to share what that password is. So you keep your Wi-Fi network as secure as possible because nobody but you as the admin or your IT person knows what that password is. And if at any point in time you're worried about a security breach, you can change it. And I just have to go into here to change the passcode. And then, whatever this was, it becomes the new one. And as soon as I hit save changes, everybody that's in operations gets the new Wi-Fi. It's also great if you have multiple locations, like if I am a dress shop and I have 3 locations in my state and I want to be able to walk into every single one. They all have different passwords. I can walk into each one because I can send out multiple Wi-Fi networks out. So you can see here, that's our example. We do have an office in Amsterdam, Austin, Minneapolis, Palo Alto. So if I as a Jamf walked into any of these locations, all of my devices would work just fine. Restrictions are here. Oh, pardon me. I just noticed that we have a new question. So I'm going to jump in here and take a look because it was regarding passwords. If the password changes and the iPad is Wi-Fi only, how can you push this to update if it's not logged into a Wi-Fi? And that's a great question. We talked about how Jamf Now works because of Apple push notification server. Without a connection to that, it won't receive commands. So if a device is not connected to Wi-Fi at that moment, maybe I'm in the middle of the park and I don't have Wi-Fi, it won't get that Wi-Fi password or any change until it reconnects to Wi-Fi. Now, if you have cellular devices, it's a network connection, so they would still get that command using cellular. But if they are only Wi-Fi and they're outside, or even if they're either and they're turned off, they won't get that command till they're back on a network. So great question. That's true of all of this because Apple Push Notification Server needs Wi-Fi to communicate. Now, if you're a techie or you're an Apple nerd like myself, you watched WWDC last week and they talked about some changes to that. I don't know any details about how that's going to work yet because it's been 4 days since they announced it and 2 of them were the weekend. And I'm not the smart people at Jamf who figure out what that means for us. But if that's a concern, keep checking jamf.com and we'll figure out what that looks like. And in particular, they were talking about lost mode specifically of how that will still work even if you're not connected to a network. But again, I'm not an engineer. I don't know how that works yet. And it's not in the product yet. So if you were to sign up today, you wouldn't have that feature, but it was something Apple just released for MDM. I see one other question here. Is there a way to disable iPhone from connecting to any Wi-Fi network and only allow iPad to connect to company-issued iPhone hotspot connection? Okay, so let me reread that again to make sure I understand. Disable iPhone from connecting to any Wi-Fi network and only allow iPad. Okay, so this question has a couple of different pieces. First off, is there a way to disable iPhone from connecting to any Wi-Fi? And the answer is yes, which is what we're getting into here with restricting it. And I'm going to jump to this high overview. This is our restriction tab. This is where we can take things off of the device or prevent them from doing things. This is where supervision versus management is going to make the biggest difference in the world. So when I go to network and cellular, there is a restriction called Wi-Fi whitelisting here in the middle. It will only allow an iOS device to connect to a Wi-Fi network that was pushed out using Jamf Now. Now you notice the last 2 words in this say supervision required. If your device uses the auto enroll or the open enrollment URL, you will not have access to this restriction. It has to be an Apple Business Manager, which again, to get into Apple Business Manager, we have to buy a specific way from one of our Apple partners or use Configurator to enroll it into Apple Business Manager. If you have supervision, Wi-Fi whitelisting means that it will only connect to the Wi-Fi networks that I have pushed out on Jamf Now. So you saw I have Wi-Fi to our office in Palo Alto, Austin, Minneapolis, and Amsterdam, right? If I walk into a Starbucks, I cannot connect to the Wi-Fi at Starbucks. If I go home, I cannot connect to the Wi-Fi at home. It will only allow me to do the ones there. Now, the second portion of your question asks if you can only allow an iPad to connect to a company-issued hotspot. And I don't know. I'm going to have to do some digging on that one because I don't know if you can push out a Wi-Fi profile that is a hotspot. I've never tried it because I usually just push out a Wi-Fi network. If you have a Jamf Now account, I would try it. See if it'll allow you to push out a Wi-Fi profile that's a hotspot. If it does, then yes, you would push out the Wi-Fi or the hotspot using your Wi-Fi tab, and then you would Wi-Fi whitelist so it won't connect to anything else. Yeah, if it works. That's going to be the key thing. Can I add a hotspot using Wi-Fi? And you'll have to try it. Or you can ping our support team, support@jamfnow.com, and they'll be able to answer that in greater detail because they get into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty of the product. But that is an excellent question, and my answer is maybe. Sorry. All right. So a couple more questions popped up as we're going here. Asking about this webinar being redone. I can't promise that. We actually haven't set our schedule for the rest of the summer yet, but I am recording it. So I'm going to copy and paste your email here, and I will be sure to send this webinar to you specifically after it's recorded. It might take a week or two because we do some editing on it first, but I will send it to you. And if anybody else wants a copy of this because they have a boss or somebody who couldn't participate with them, send an email to apple.retail@jamf.com. Again, that's apple.retail@jamf.com, and I'll be sure to get it to you. If you have a contact at Jamf, ask them for this webinar and they'll be able to get it from me and I'll be able to send it to you. So excellent question. Sorry that you had an emergency and had to drop off. We'll make sure we get you the webinar though. Okay, a similar question regarding the Wi-Fi only. If you allow employees to log into their iTunes account, which allows it to see their iPhones, will the iPhones be Wi-Fi whitelisted hotspot? That's another really great question. I don't think so. One, iTunes was actually announced last week. It's going to be deprecated. So it's a program that is going away. That Apple has kind of taken everything out of it. So you have a podcast app, you have a music app, you have a TV app, all those things. So iTunes isn't going to be around for too much longer. Again, with the Wi-Fi hotspot, if Jamf Now will let you push out a Wi-Fi hotspot, then you would. Because if I Wi-Fi whitelist, it won't allow me to connect even if I were to connect to iTunes. There is also a way that you can prevent an iPhone from connecting to a computer. So if you were worried about that, you could definitely prevent it from connecting to a computer and only use the Wi-Fi whitelisting. With these, you may have to do some testing on your own to see if it works. I apologize. I haven't done a ton of work with hotspotting. So test if you can push the hotspot out. We'll probably have some more controls. If we can't push a hotspot out, then we're a little bit more stuck. But if you have support at jamfnow.com, they'll be able to walk you through, I think, a little bit better. And they have some test devices they can go through and check that out as well. Wonderful. All right, we got a little bit sidetracked and a little ahead of ourselves with the questions, but I wanted to make sure that we got those answered because it sounds like some people are using iOS already. Oh my goodness, it's also 10:58, so this is lots of questions, which is great. Again, I'm going to record this, so if you have to drop off, because 10:58 Central, apologies if you're in any other time zone. If you have to drop off to go to another meeting, I will be sure to send this out. I just quickly want to go through a couple of things in here. Again, we have supervision required on many of the restrictions. So if you don't use Apple Business Manager to supervise devices, you're going to miss out on a lot of these features. So there's a ton of information in here, 75 different restrictions that are in existence. A big one I like to point out is changing to accounts. If you check this box, it doesn't allow people to sign in with their Apple ID. So that's really huge. But read through them. You can see each one of them has information within it. as to what it means. Here's where you can disable connecting with computers. So for the iTunes question, you can prevent it from that. So knowing that is really important, or really huge, to be able to go through all of those. I want to make sure I cover here too the open enrollment tab. You can see on the left I went under settings to open enrollment. This is where I find my open enrollment link. So if you want to do user initiated URL, you have to enable it. You're going to require a passcode. You've got a couple other questions to answer here, and then you tell them to go to this link. You can send it via email or an iMessage, or you can just write it down somewhere for them. Tell them to go here in Safari, and it will load up and put them into the open enrollment mode of Jamf Now. So you won't have supervision, but you will get inventory, and you will be able to push out passcodes and Wi-Fi and all of that. All right, so we are back in our keynote. Couple of key pieces, of course, best practices. We recommend Apple Business Manager because of automatic enrollment, wireless supervision, non-removable MDM. We talked about how we can remove it with user initiated. I don't have a way to delete MDM if I use Apple Business Manager, which is very secure and gives us those important keys, right? Quick reminder of Jamf Now, it's meant to be an easy device setup, simple management, which we saw through the profile, and security without complexity. It allows you to push out those Wi-Fis and moving on with all of those different pieces. Resources, jamfnow.com, of course, is a fantastic resource. There's a video right on the front page that you can review again if you want to learn more. Support.jamfnow.com is a great place to go. We have a ton of information. You can use the search feature. Our next live webinars are on there. So if you've never seen Jamf Now and you want to see a greater demo than I gave, feel free to attend one of those, or you just want to see another one. That will all be on there, upcoming webinars and key changes to Jamf Now. We do have a sales team, jamfnow.sales@jamf.com. We also have several resellers that can sell Jamf Now. So if you work with an Apple business team, or if you work with a T-Mobile, ask your partner if you can buy Jamf direct from them, because a lot of times you can. And that's where we've got our Apple partners there. If you have more questions, please put them in the chat or into the questions area. I'm getting a couple requests to send the webinar. I won't have access to your emails after this webinar is over. So if you could at all email apple.retail@jamf.com. That way I can send it to everybody. That would be great. Oh, I've got another email in here, which is wonderful. I am copying and pasting these. Also very helpful if you can, in fact, send it to jamfnow.com or apple.retail@jamf.com. My apologies, I was multitasking there. So I don't see any other questions, which is great, and I didn't actually go over by too much, which is great news. If you have questions along the way, again, apple.retail@jamf.com. We're here for you. Support@jamfnow.com is an amazing group of people that will help you out as well. They're available 24 hours a day because we kick over to Amsterdam and Sydney and Tokyo in the evening hours in the U.S., but they're mainly based in Minneapolis and Eau Claire. But 24 hours a day, 5 days a week. We do shut down on the weekend. So if you have questions then, shoot them an email and they'll be sure to get back to you on Monday or here to try and help out as much as possible. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me, and support.jamfnow.com will list all of our upcoming webinars. Thank you and have a wonderful day.